Welcome to episode 2 of Probably Poly Particulars, the video podcast where we haven't come up with a slogan yet. As always, I am your host, Michael Haig.
And I'm your co-host, Mandy Koenig.
So we didn't even introduce the name or anything else on the first episode, but basically the upshot is we're now doing these 15-minute short versions of the podcast, but we're doing them in video takes, and they're only going to be available mostly through video. The last one we threw up an audio clip of because it was really important. It was about local Black Lives Matter issues and trying to mobilize and get people out. That's not always going to be the case. We're going to talk a little bit faster, cut a little bit harder. The goal is to get either small issues that we can cover quickly or reference issues that we can start sending people to from the show. So we can say, if you need to understand the hegemony, hit this episode. It's 15 quick minutes of all of the information citations that you need to get that concept, so we don't have to keep referencing it or explaining it. Today's episode is how to know when to give up on ethical non-monogamy.
It's just not for some people.
So a listener wrote in and said, people will always say, maybe non-monogamy is not for you, but people don't really spend a lot of time talking about how you might know it's not for you. So they wanted to know how one would know it is or isn't for you. And Mandy and I are going to have, sounds like already, slightly different opinions.
Why do you think that? Why do you think that off the bat?
Well, because you were like, it's not for everyone, and I'm kind of like, well, it's kind of for everybody. I don't know. It depends on how you phrase it, by what you mean by not for everyone. So the first thing we have to do is talk about what it means to be ethically non-monogamous in just short. Ethical non-monogamy is about your mindset. So you can only be dating one person and still be ethically non-monogamous if you don't hold the requirement that one person has to only be with one person and that relationships can and do shift and evolve authentically over time. That's still being ethically non-monogamous. To be monogamous would require there to be an agreement that the relationship will never shift, like a commitment to never shifting the relationship. That's a form of objectification because you're projecting yourself as an object into a future as opposed to allowing yourself the possibility of growth and change and needing different perspectives over time. It may be helpful as a label to say like we're functionally monogamous or our relationship, unless we discuss it further, we're only seeing one person at a time right now. But monogamy is the belief that you're going to be with one person no matter what till the end and that you can promise that.
Yes, agreed.
So for my sense, ethical non-monogamy is actually for everyone, even if you only end up dating one person. But people get to use labels the way they want, and people are going to use that label in other cases. Because, for example, I know people in non-monogamous relationships where they identify as being monogamous in a non-monogamous relationship. And of course, you could have it aim at intent instead of promising, like, I'm an intentional monogamous, meaning that I intend to stay with this one person and be with no one else sexually or romantically for the rest of my life. But if that changes, I'm okay with that. And I would say, well, that's fine and ethical and coherent. But it's not really what people normally mean when they say monogamous, to be honest.
Right. I've definitely heard, and I think that I have said at previous points in my life, I have an ethically non-monogamous mindset, but I'm in a monogamous relationship. So I think that my relationships have maybe at times identified as monogamous, but I have never identified as monogamous. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I can see that too. I can see saying that this relationship is in a monogamous structure or a monogamous frame, or I would use some additional couching language personally. I wouldn't just say is monogamous. So then the question would be, knowing that non-monogamy isn't problematic and leaving the door open for the possibility that your emotional state and personal experience will change or that new people will come into your life, when would you go, okay, but I'm going to focus on monogamy? Because for sure, there is something about being in a non-monogamous intent as opposed to a non-monogamous frame. So I exist in a non-monogamous frame, but I don't necessarily always have consistent non-monogamous intent because I'm not always on dating apps talking to people, even necessarily open to new partners because I'm potentially completely polysaturated. And as we've said before, you can be polysaturated with one partner, especially if you've got young kids or old kids or a lot of kids or parents you have to take care of or job complications or financial troubles.
Even if one of your relationships is going through something that you can only focus on that relationship at that moment. So it doesn't have to be outside things.
Yeah, you see a lot of people posting, I'm going to open my relationship because it's having problems. And we'll always say the opposite. Like, no. Open a relationship. Yeah. You should not be massively state changing your relationship while it has problems. You need to fix those problems or leave that relationship and then talk about state changing.
Right. I'm having problems in my relationship. Let's have a baby. No.
That said, what you may find is that your particular life frame and interests don't allow you to desire another partner, and maybe don't allow you to desire being with someone who's actively taking on partners. And so that's more about what you want for your life right now. So it would be similar to like if I'm dating someone and they say, I want to go get this PhD and there's a great program on the other side of the country and I'm going to move there for 4 years. Do you want to be in a long distance relationship with me for 4 years? I may well be like, I don't want to do that. That's too hard on me. I would rather simply let you go and be distance friends or something. And when you get back, we can talk about maybe dating again.
Right. It's priorities.
And I would say that the same thing is going to be true of the how many other people are you going to date? You know, you can't tell other people how many people they should be able to date, but you can date people who feel like they only want to date one person for now, and then as you keep checking in with them, you're both willing to have that discussion again, and if your needs change, the relationship might have to transition into something else.
Right.
The problem to me with the thought of when do you decide you're not non-monogamous anymore is that I feel like the follow-up to that is to go back on Tinder or Bumble or OkCupid and list yourself as monogamous and date monogamous people who are not being ethically monogamous. So we've talked about ethical monogamy before, but the short version is normal monogamy is practiced without additional consideration is usually a form of toxic monogamy, and it's a non-ethical system where each of you makes part of or all of yourself into an object and then trades that object with the other person in a cross-objectification scheme that isn't a form of intentional power play. So you're not acknowledging that's what's happening, but you're saying things that are entirely impossible, like, I promise I'll never love anyone else. I promise I'll never find anyone else sexually attractive. I promise I'll never want to. Yeah, I'm yours forever. You're mine forever.
Yeah.
And that mine thing, that's all about making yourself into an object and then giving that object to somebody. My concern is that when you go back into the regular dating community, you're not going to have that conversation with someone at the beginning. You're not going to say, let's talk about how we both have the intention to be monogamous, but that could shift for either of us at either time, and we're very willing to have that conversation in the future to keep this relationship healthy instead of punitive and damaging and hurting each other. And that doesn't usually happen.
Yeah.
But I do have to say, like, sometimes I am monogamous for a period of time. In my own head, I just go, I don't have the energy. I really want to focus on this partner. I'm really enjoying just focusing on this partner. I'm not even really seeing other people sexually right now. I'm not even interested in it sometimes for a while.
Right.
And I'll go, okay, well, I'm just going to focus on this then. I'm not going to make myself go date people. And then later, if that changes, I change back. And I have, of course, an open polyamorous, ethically non-monogamous partnership, so that's not a thing that I even necessarily talk to the other person about too much. I might say I'm not looking or I am looking, depending. But that's very different than basically saying I'm going to quit being part of the intentional relationship crowd, because I think that's really what my concern is. I think you can realize that handling multiple people doesn't feel right for you right now, although most of the things that people have written about the science and study of ethical non-monogamy is that the problem isn't at the beginning of relationships. It's about 5+ years in for most people. Like the first 4 to 5 years, everything's still new enough. Around 2 years, for a lot of people, there's a slight decline in libido. There's another huge one around 7 years.
It's like, is it that 7-year itch that they talk about?
Yeah, but I think for most people, if you have 3 to 4 to 5 years where it's sort of working, and then at the end of that, that's when you start feeling isolated and forced. And so it's really easy to go, well, non-monogamy is not working. I'm going to go back to monogamy. It's such a path of least resistance because it's then a million people want to date you and you're suddenly much more desirable. Your dating pool goes way up. It's a lot easier to get that person that you're excited about and you're excited about them. But that's only because you're failing to actually have these deeper conversations.
Right. Because relationships are hard. And polyamory or ethical non-monogamy is exponentially hard. So it is absolutely easier to just have one relationship. And it's much harder to be actively ethically non-monogamous because you are juggling multiple relationships. And for you to just go, yeah, I just don't think it's for me, it's taking the easy way out. It's going, yeah, I give up. It's not worth it.
Well, and it's not that I would say it's easier in any moment to be monogamous than non-monogamous. But I do think that at least for me, I find it to be easier over the long run to be non-monogamous. That my monogamy relationship started running into jealousy and fighting and issues with libido and issues with staying staying interested in each other. And I've never had those problems in non-monogamy, even though I relatively rarely date, sometimes as rarely as once a year. And I mostly have one partner, and for most occurrences, I look primarily monogamous in a lot of contexts, or I can read that way. The fact that I'm not is important. I don't sit up at night staring at my partner going, is this really okay if I'm never with anyone else? Do they really feel every need that I have? Are they really going to cross the finish line with me? Like, I don't have to obsess about those things because it's not required.
Right.
And I think that's one of the great gifts of non-monogamy in the long run. So I think it feels easier right now. But the other thing is this. I would say if your thought is it's hard and it's not working, is I would ask yourself how many monogamous relationships you've had that have failed. And then give non-monogamy that many relationships to try. And when you get to that number, then compare the two lifestyles and tell me which one you think is for you, if that's the reason why. Now,
because you make a great point, because people will be in one non-monogamous relationship and go, oh, that's not for me, I can't do it, when they've been in 15 other monogamous relationships that have failed.
Yeah.
But you continue to give that a shot.
Yeah, well, even like they'll even do 5 or 6 relationships. But again, like you said, it's like 6 versus 16. So of course your comfort level, interest, and understanding in monogamous relationships is higher. First of all, you did 16. Second of all, you should try and educate yourself as much about non-monogamy as you put into monogamy. So think about the total number of rom-com movies you've ever watched. Multiply that by the average watch time of 1.5 hours.
Right.
Add to that the conversations you've had about monogamous relationships. Invest that in reading a few good non-monogamous books. Watch some non-monogamous videos. Listen to some non-monogamous podcasts. Have those conversations with non-monogamous friends. And try and get the same amount of input into this alternate relationship style, because it's a skill set. You have to build that skill set.
Right.
So then the other thought is, well, what if you're problematic? So what if you're really toxically jealous, really objectifying, etc.? You shouldn't be dating if you have those behaviors, but you shouldn't be dating at all. Yeah, period. If you have those behaviors. So it's not like we don't want you dating non-monogamously if you have those behaviors, obviously, because it's going to put pressure on those behaviors. But dating monogamously is going to put pressure on those behaviors, but in a controlling and really damaging way for your partner, who may not even notice it, because the whole point of toxic monogamy as practiced in our culture is to reinforce these toxic behaviors so that you can stay in it despite how damaging it is. So intentional relationships is where everyone should be going, which does not include objectification. And objectification includes impossible future self-state promises that place limitations on the way that you are going to grow and change as a person. So if you have an intentional monogamous relationship that it understands that it may not be able to stay monogamous, and that's okay and part of the dynamic, and it's just aiming at staying monogamous, but that might not be what serves you in the future, that's fine. If you have an intentional non-monogamous relationship, that's fine. But having a forced either is not fine. So for example, being in the kind of non-monogamous relationship where you are expected and required to have a certain number of partners per period in order to qualify is every bit as toxic as being in a monogamous relationship where you're expected to never have any partners in order to qualify. So then you don't even really have to answer the question, I think, am I monogamous or non-monogamous? What you are is you are a living, changing human being in an intentional relationship who is in dialogue with the partner that you have about what that relationship is most comfortable like for both of you, and at a place where currently what's most comfortable is being with just that other partner. Because I do push back on people who want to identify as monogamous but are open to that change, because that is not what monogamy means. It means one marriage, one love, one life.
Till death do you part.
Yeah. So using that as an ideal to aim at is very different than committing yourself to do that no matter what. Because if the relationship doesn't serve the people in it anymore and just serves to make the promises work, that's a damaging, toxic relationship. And that's just really easy to do in a situation where you've promised forever. Because you're promising, I will always find you sexually interesting. I will not find other people sexually interesting. If I do find other people sexually interesting, I'll cut my brain out of that part and never think about them again somehow. I will avoid going around or being around those people. I will gouge certain relationships out of my life if they threaten this relationship that's the only sexual relationship. And that's not healthy for anyone. I think that the question of when do you know that non-monogamy isn't right for you is the same way that existentialists want to answer everything. It's when you die. So if you're dead and you have only been with one person your whole life, non-monogamy was not right for you. We now know the answer to the question. If you're still alive, what's right for you is intentional relationships and whatever comes next that is healthy and right for you.
Yep.
All right. That's it.
On that.
All right. I hope everybody enjoyed that, and I hope you'll all join us next time. And also check out the podcast. Links in the description. We've got a 2-year archive you can check out if you thought this was good material. It's all about relationships ethics generally, but through the lens of non-monogamy. But it's helpful even if you just want to figure out how to be better at being friends with people. Everybody have a great day.
Absolutely. Thanks for watching.
Bye.